So, friends, let's welcome Professor Siby K. George to our, course on Western philosophy organized by Bhaktivedanta Research Center. It's great to have Professor George with us today. He is a professor of philosophy at IIT Bombay. He is considered as an expert on continental philosophy with special reference to Heidegger. He has many important books and publications to his credit. Without wasting any more time, over to you, Professor George.
All right. So, thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much, Professor Nirmalya Chakrabarti and Professor Madhuchanda, whom I have known for a long time. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you also to Bhaktivedanta Research Institute. I straight away go to my topic, Heidegger and Existentialist Ethics. I speak about a little over 1 hour. Let me put my clock on. All right. So Heidegger and Existentialist Ethics is our topic today. I'm going to speak basically about being and time, Heidegger's 1927 book, Sein and Zeit, Being and Time. And I'm going to look at this book, this work, as attempting to answer a question. And the question is, can we inherently social human beings, or what he calls Dasein, can we ever attain genuine individuality? That's the kind of question he according to me settles in Being and Time. Now, when we say inherently social, he also seems to think that is what makes us inauthentic. So inauthentic here simply means that we make our decisions not as individuals, as somebody who is aware of our own choices, but we make our choices in conformity with norms or ideas that are there in the social sphere. So the authentic choices, the word we translate is Eigenschlichkeit. It actually means own. Anyway, so my proposal in this lecture is basically that, yes, according to Being and Time, at least in one of the prominent interpretations, yes, we can make authentic choices, though we are social beings, socially conformed to a great extent. But this proposal also would mean that individuality can never be totally untouched by sociality. It can only be a modification of Dasein's inherent being with or Mitsein. Now, this question is basically an ontological question about human being and its being, whether it is individual or socially conformed. This question can be also raised in relation to ethics. So then it will be something like this. So the problem is basically that if you're so socially conformed, if we are inherently social, we are primordially social, first of all social, in that case, can we ever be authentic? Can we ever be authentically individual is a question. So the ethical question then would be, can the inherently social or inauthentic Dasein human being, can that kind of human being who is conformed to moral norms of the tradition, of culture, of religion, etc., can they ever be ethical as authentic individuals? So that would therefore mean, can there ever be an individual who is authentically ethical? Or can there be an authentic individual who is also genuinely ethical. Now, being in time's answer, as is well known, is quite ambivalent on this question, especially about ethical question. I'm going to argue that such kind of ambivalence is important because it shows about us, about human condition in a significant way without much deception. And therefore, it is opening a window to human condition as such. Therefore, it is important, is going to be what I'm trying to say. We are now coming to the first part of being in time, division 1, as it is called. A word about being, which is Heidegger's, very central concept. So, being is an important philosophical word right from ancient times in all philosophical traditions. And being is usually associated with the idea about all that exists in their totality. To the extent that we can speak of that which is not being as not being, everything is included in the term being, all that exists, all that has existence, including the human being, the gods, if they exist, things of the world, pen and paper, all the things that we experience. They all are put together under the banner of being. There's another way in which we speak about being, generally. Each entity that exists in its separateness from being as a whole, as separate entities in their essential being. Now, Heidegger speaks about being in both these senses. But he must be understood basically as introducing a very important nuance to the term being. And that nuance is that he's going to introduce a very verbal, flow, temporal kind of, meaning to the term being. Being must be understood verbally in a process, because being is that which is meaningfully present, and he will verbalize all these nouns, presencing, meaningfully present or presencing to the human being as a phenomenon in the flow of time. He's a phenomenologist. We are speaking about what we experience, phenomena. And being, and his argument, unlike that of Husserl, is that phenomenology is basically ontology. It's about being as presencing in time to the human Dasein. But he does not speak about presencing in consciousness, unlike Husserl. He's not a philosopher of consciousness. Instead, he's a philosopher of the pre-reflective. Of course, we can say pre-reflective consciousness. He does not also use several other traditional words of philosophy like subject, object, and so on. So being presents itself primarily in human pre-reflective states before it becomes cognitively very prominent as a clear idea in the mind. And being pre-reflectively exists in states, in human states, pre-reflective states, as both the background that we spoke about as the first sense of being, the background, the totality, as something, but this totality is constantly on the basis of it, it is foregrounding these separate entities. So being as the big background is foregrounding beings or entities in their plurality. Because being is constantly appearing in temporal flow, it is constitutively historical for Heidegger. The human being or Dasein, therefore, is that being which already always has some kind of inexplicit, pre-reflective, non-conscious, as it were, understanding of being. At the same time, there is an element of awareness. So at least if we scratch behind it, we can bring it to the fore. So the sign is in this way, literally the or the there, the placeholder of meaningful presencing or being, sign. The sign has this sense. The sign is usually spoken of as existence. So existence in this sense that it is an existence which always has an awareness of being. Now, all this is so, according to Heidegger, because the sign has a specific structure. And that structure in the first division of being and time is in der Welt sign, being in the world. And this structure can be split into three, as it were, for the sake of analysis. Otherwise, it cannot be split. But for the sake of analysis, we can say that it is being with others or mit sign. It is being alongside things of the world, signed by, and it is being a self sign. So all this put together, we get this comprehensive phenomenon called being in the world. Now, as a phenomenologist, Heidegger is always trying to speak about how things are disclosed, how meaningful presencing is happening to the sign, disclosure is happening. So we are speaking about disclose, things being disclosed to the sign. Now, things can be disclosed to the sign because disclosedness is a prominent existential feature, ontological feature of this being called the sign, according to Heidegger. And this ontological feature, which is called disclosedness, has again three features. Things are disclosed to the sign, constantly appearing before the sign, because the sign is already in a disposition. Befindlichkeit is a German term. The idea of attuned to a condition, being in a mood, disposition. At the same, so the past or the world into which the sign is thrown is already affecting the sign. And that affecting is shown in terms of certain moods, even in different moods, not being in a happy or bad mood or sad mood or whatever. At the same and in terms of the future, the sign is always projecting possibilities of the way in which it is experiencing the world, its past, it's there, is always projected to possibilities of the future. It's like you are an archer and you have this quiver of arrows, your thrownness, out of which you pick one or two or some and shoot, and they go to their target in different ways. So this projection is called Westerhen, understanding. Right from very rudimentary forms of making sense of the world, managing the world, grappling with the world, to very complex forms of understanding like mathematical understanding or whatever. And all this happens, according to Heidegger, in terms of discourse or language or talk. Rede is a German term that he uses at this stage in Being and Time. So you express the way in which the world affects you and your thrownness, and of that, the possibilities you express, these are all happening through language, through words, through talking with yourself, with others. And this is the way in which all the beings in the world are disclosed to the sign in a pre-reflective sense before it becomes cognitively prominent and clear. This kind of unobtrusive or non-obstructed manner in which things are disclosed to the sign, this happens, according to Heidegger, because the sign has also another tendency other than disposition, understanding, and discourse. it has another tendency to be lost in the world, to be fallen into the world, vastahan, to be at home with the world, homeliness. Now, these are all ontological terms. So what he means by being lost in the world, this is both actually good and bad. It is good in the sense that if we are always continuously reflecting about things that are appearing to us and about the world and become very prominently conscious of things, our existence would become very cumbersome, very burdensome. We have to each time be very sure of what we are doing next, to the extent that we should be sure of the ground beneath our feet. Existence becomes quite smooth because we are pre-reflectively present, lost in the world, at home with the world. We are fiddling with things in a pre-reflective awareness. So when I walk in the road, I'm also aware of the vehicles that are coming and I'm navigating, although I am thinking reflectively about several other things. It is in this form that Heidegger speaks about everyday Dasein as inauthentic. It is not making conscious choice. It is not making reflective choices in terms of what is its own, but it's simply taking the world as it is. Certain norms are there already in the world. These are given to it. Dasein from its babyhood is inserted into this world and it grapples with it. It receives it. It passively receives this world and accepts it and and does its activities in terms of this world. Now, this being the case, normative morality must be inauthentic because moral norms are not authentically chosen by the self, by self, by each of us, but it is imposed upon us socially. Imposed in the sense it's already given. It's already taught to us right from our family. Before we could, reflectively reject a few, these things are given to us. To that extent, we say in phenomenology that there is passivity, passive reception to these things. The everyday self, which is experiencing the world in this unobtrusive fashion, according to Heidegger, is the they self. We are trying to find out whether Dasein can be authentic self. But Heidegger at this stage says that no, everyday life makes ourself not authentic, but inauthentic. There's no self, actually. The self, myself, is that of the day, Dasma. Why is it so? Because pre-reflective receptivity makes it so. Pre-reflective receptivity functions so smoothly so that the norms and the ways of the world are, achieved without rejecting some of them, without much objection. Therefore, at one point in being time, Heidegger says, everyone is the other and no one is himself. The they, which supplies the answer to who of everyday Dasein, is the nobody to whom every Dasein has always already surrendered itself in its being among one another. So being with, which is ontologically so close to us, so inherently ours, so inescapably ours, is at the same time making us inauthentic, doesn't allow us to become ourselves, to achieve our authentic individuality. As it were, on the one hand, society is so important. We are not solitary beings. Solitariness makes us uncomfortable. On the other hand, it also does not really allow us to become individual. This is why Sartre and all would say that hell is the other people. So this is a picture of the everyday Dasein in being a time division one. Dasein is inauthentic, socially conformed, socially leveled. It follows imposed moral norms, cultural norms, social norms, religious norms, etc. It follows them. It finds pleasure in following them. It is seduced into this world. It's fallen. So these are, very Christian terms, fallen. It's fallen into this world. So what is on offer in division 2 of the time? It attempts to overturn this bleak picture of the sign, bleak in one sense. Otherwise, it makes our life very comfortable. Everything is given in a platter, as it were. In division 2, we are encountering the authentic heroic Dasein who chooses for herself, for himself, without deception, without these seductions of the world. Now, this is actually the goal of the analysis of the whole of being and time. Of course, it is arrived at in division 2. We must think of few points before we go to division 2. Of course, I have simplified the whole narrative of division 1. There are many other nuances which you can go through by yourself. A few points to be anticipated about the analysis of division 2 of being and time. To some extent, authentic morality should be impossible. If morality is all about following the given social norms and conforming to them completely. So if we think of authentic morality as, completely making moral norms by ourselves in a Nietzschean heroic sense, then authentic morality would not be possible, because we are already social beings conformed to the world. Secondly, if Dasein is fundamentally social, if fundamentally social we are, inescapably already fallen into the world, in being in the world, then absolute authenticity of the individual, if we consider the individual as a kind of an atom, atomistic individualism, today people call this idea, if we consider authenticity as absolute atomistic individuality, achieving that, then that ideal also might be impossible, because we are inherently, inescapably already social, fallen into the world. Being in the world is not a structure that sometimes can be put aside and sometimes can be accepted. It's a structure that is there with the sign all the time, as long as the sign is the sign. So existentialist ethics must find its place in the space that is opening up now before us in our analysis in relation to two of these impossibilities, the impossibility of absolute authenticity and the impossibility of absolutely authentic morality. Between these two absolutes, there should be an authentic morality of some variety possible. That's my search. That's my kind of goal. Both these absolutes are perhaps not there at all, not possible. And yet, we are able to see something radically significant about human condition, about human morality, about the fragility of morality, about the finiteness of our condition. We are not gods, we are not angels, we are human beings, and we have to make our choices within these limitations, these drives, these ways in which the world affects us, these projections or possibilities. How that is possible is the analysis of division 2. So the analysis of division 2, for that we have these important concepts like conscience and guilt. Are you there? I hope you people are there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So division 2 portrays Dasein as radically aware of the finitude of itself. Or this is, of course, the most famous part of being in time, death, the analysis of death or thought. So Dasein is, as it were, as soon as it begins to exist, as soon as it has an awareness of its being, we don't know when, but at some point in the initial phase, already it's aware of its finiteness and it's running towards, as it were, towards its death. It's as though that is the kind of regulative frame which is guiding or directing the science life, the science existence. So authentic choice is about making choices not as gods, not as angels, not as these perfect beings, but as fragile, frail, faltering, historically placed human dasein. We cannot choose the place of our birth, our parents, our situations, our language. These are given to us without our choice. So, and we make our choices, and as it were, an understanding of being of the whole is also given to us. And this understanding of being is the limited whole on the basis of which we make meanings out of things. Meanings of things in relation to this limited whole only we can make. Even our ethical choices will have to be in relation to these limited wholes that we encounter. Authentic choices are, again, things that are or phenomenon, aspects of experiences that are disclosed to the sun. And when these are disclosed, authentic choices are disclosed, how that can happen is the question that we are discussing. It happens, Heidegger says, when there is a call of conscience. Gewissen, there's a call of conscience. These are all, very Christian terms actually, but he's secularizing them, or he's existentializing them. There's a call of conscience, not from a God, not from anywhere else, but from within the sign, to own up its ontological possibilities. Within the sign, in relation to the sign's awareness of its radical finitude, which means death, and a desire to own up responsibility or indebtedness. He's not using the usual German term for responsibility, but indebtedness, where an element of guilt is there, Verschuldung for our being. So we are in guilt, in conscience, we are not becoming aware of a moral phenomenon in relation to another person of something, or something of that sort, or in relation to a God, but we are becoming conscious, in our conscience, we are becoming aware of, or we are disclosed to certain things about owning up our own possibilities of our own being. This disposition of conscience is possible through a mood. Everything is possible only through a mood. So the mood which helps this happen is a mood called Angst, anxiety, which is also today, an English term, a German term, but it has become an English term, is Angst. And Angst has no specific object which makes the human being anxious. Whereas in fear, Heidegger says that there are specific objects like a dog which is charging at you, or a gun, somebody who is going to fire at you, or fire that you are afraid you might be falling into, etc. Those things are not here. There is no specific object. It's actually the existence as a whole that is a question in Angst. But at the same time, it's an unsettling mood, an existential disquiet, unsettlement, a discomfort, an eerie feeling due to what Heidegger calls guilt, ontological guilt or schuld, which is already there in that verse, the word, the term for indebtedness. The term schuld is already there. The call of conscience makes one feel guilty for not owning up one's own most possibilities, not paying the debt to one's own most being, and for merely conforming to Dasman's or the they selves anonymous possibilities, be they normatively ethical possibilities, moral possibilities of whatever be the contemporary ethics, religious or secular or whatever. So these things makes the sign very perturbed about its own ontological possibility. So how do we make sense of these things? So when existence is, going smoothly. We have gone through school. We have we have got very good marks. We were lucky. We have passed a great examination. We are into great institutes. We are like IIT. We are doing very well in studies, and we are going to be price commodity in the marriage market of the great Indian wedding market, marriage market. But still, and we are into a great job, and existence is going smoothly, and um, things are flowing. But there could be an eerie feeling that something is not right, something is not going strong, something is amiss. So these are perhaps areas where this existential angst is slowly eating into our being. So the seductions and tranquilizations of the world into which we are already fallen, everyday world, are silenced by the conscience, which is making us aware of our ontological guilt. Therefore, we are face to face. We are brought face to face with guilt. We are made to encounter that, and the guilt that we are speaking about here is always about a lack, about a nullity. He says about a not, that we are not being measured up to something. We are not being true to something. We are not being completely taking responsible for something. So this is also the idea of moral guilt. And Heidegger at one point in these passages says that we are not speaking about moral guilt. And moral guilt is possible only because we are able to experience this ontological guilt. He says that. So though he does not discuss ethics per se, there are enough indications that an ethics is possible on the basis of these ontological insights. Now, this guilt is uh, the moral guilt is usually pertaining to our dealings with others, which is actually not primordial. Though being with is primordial, our relation to others, the guilt that arises from that is not primordial for Heidegger. The primordial guilt is guilt about our own being. Now, I'm emphasizing this point about guilt because this will give us some kind of insight about the kind of existential ethics that I'm trying to draw from it. For Heidegger, ontological guilt is primordial, as I said. It's about a lack, a not, nullity, Nichtigkeit, regarding our own existence, our own being, with respect to three aspects. First, nullity of thrownness. He speaks about his German term is Geworfenheit, nullity of thrownness. So the ground on the basis of which Dasein is choosing the understanding of being, which is given in a particularly limited form of the world, that is the basis of our choices, of our moral choices. That's a thrownness. And that is null because we have not chosen this world. This world is given to us. We have received it. So he writes, Dasein is never existent before its ground. Before the ground is the world. And the world is a very null, groundless ground, upground, as it were. So it never exists. It is never existent before its ground, but only from it an asset. From this ground onwards only we are making our choices on the basis of this ground. Thus, being the ground means never to gain power over one's own most being from the ground up. We have no power over that ground, which is the basis on which we are going to make all the other choices. This not belongs to the existential meaning of thrownness. This not having power over the ground. Being the ground, it itself is a nullity of itself. The thrown ground, its own world, is the finite ground of all the possibilities of Dasein can choose and make its own. And again, he writes, Dasein is not itself the ground of its being, inasmuch as a ground first arises from its own project, but as a self, It is the being of its ground. From the ground up, it makes its being. Secondly, the nullity of projection. We said roof is projection. We said that the sign is affected by its world in terms of disposition, and it is constantly projecting its possibilities in terms of understanding. Now, Heidegger says the sign operates by projecting itself upon possibilities into which it is thrown. That is true. On the basis of its ground, thrown ground, it is choosing. It is projecting possibilities. That is, it chooses some of the possibilities every moment, either authentically, resolutely. The term for resolution is Entschlossenheit, either resolutely or inauthentically, in a conformed way. But in choosing, the sign simply cannot choose other possibilities. Therefore, there is a not in each of our choice. When I choose to hold his mobile phone, I am already choosing not to hold this cup and this pen and several other possibilities, even more important possibilities, perhaps, that are there in front of me. Therefore, he writes, but this means that as a potentiality for being, the sign is always a potentiality for being something more. It is not yet at every moment. Sign conan, potentiality for being. It always stands in one possibility or another. It is constantly not other possibilities and has relinquished these other possibilities, in existential projection. Existential with the spelling means concrete projection. Third, the nullity of fallenness, for fallen. Dasana is also already not authentic. Dasana is first of all inauthentic, everyday, received world, conformed world, all that we said. Therefore, Dasana is always already inauthentic. From out of that only it can become authentic, at least to some extent. So due to its nullity, it is not able to raise itself fully into its own pure, as it were, almost self and pure possibilities. Therefore, he writes, Dasein is the ground for the possibility of the nullity of inauthentic Dasein. It is falling prey, falling into the world, which it always already actually is practically. Now, for Dasein, for Heidegger, Dasein's essential aspect of Dasein's being is care. And in the second division of the being and time, he would say that care would actually mean temporality. But forget about that. Care would mean that Dasein is a being which always is concerned about its being. It takes issue with its being. There is an element of interest in all that I see, as it were, and that interest is actually an interest about my own being. So care, sorg, itself is in a sense thoroughly permeated with nullity. Care is a being of the sign, and care would therefore mean thrown projection, thrown in the world, and from there projecting, being the null basis, the null ground of nullity, Heidegger says. Therefore, is authentic ethics possible is a question. So what do we conclude from this picture of the human being is a question. Historically constituted we are, finitely situated we are in a world of norms, values, meanings. We are poised to interpret and choose possibilities resolutely in order to be ourselves truly. At least at some crucial moments or limit situations of our lives, we are able to make some choices which appear to be authentic. Or is that really possible is the question. So, and the more important question, even if we are able to make those choices which are authentic, could those choices be moral? Usually speaking, no, because those choices will go against culturally accepted norms regarding good behavior, bad behavior, evil behavior, and so on. and even against well thought out moral paradigms like Kantianism or utilitarianism or virtue ethics or whatever, or religious morality or cultural morality, all those. They could often go against the law, though law need not be fully moral. These, therefore, fall short of ethical and legal norms, our choices, authentic choices. If they are actually in line with the moral norm or law, then when one tries to speak this very language of being in line with socially conformed patterns and paradigms, one already throws oneself into the realm of the anonymous they. So therefore, there is a tension, complete tension. So when one embraces socially conformed existence, there is perhaps no possibility of ethics. Hence, we are back with the Nietzschean heroic Übermensch, or the overman, the superman, who is the author of moral law from within, subjectively, as it were. So Dostoevsky, the famous Russian novelist, says, if God is dead, then everything is permitted. It is from this background that I come to my interpretation. Therefore, I place before you a few passages. The first passage is the nullity we have in mind belongs to the science being free for its existential, concrete possibilities. Freedom, however, is only in the choice of one possibility, that is, in tolerating one's not having chosen the others, and one's not being able to choose them. So freedom itself is a limited freedom. Freedom itself is simply our ability to choose one of the given possibilities and interpreting it and choosing, and not choosing the others. That's one idea. Thrown into its there, the sign is always factically dependent on a definite world, its world. At the same time, those nearest factical projects are guided by the lostness in the day, taking care of things. This lostness, fallenness, can be summoned by one's own Dasein. The summons can be understood in the mode of resoluteness. Summon means a call of conscience. But authentic disclosedness then modifies equiprimordially the discoveredness of the world grounded in it and the disclosedness of being with others. So, authentic way in which our choices are disclosed to us, these are simply ways of modifying the world and its possibilities, not making absolutely new Nietzschean kind of choices. The world at hand does not become different as far as content is concerned. The circle of others is not exchanged for a new one. Being with is something which is already there. And yet, the being toward things at hand, which understands and takes care of things, and the concerned being with others, is now defined in terms of their ownmost potentiality for being a self. In blue, I have put. So, taking something from the basket of choices, that possibilities that are in front of us, making them our own, is a kind of authenticity ideal that he is proposing. Falling prey to the world is, however, phenomenal evidence against the existentiality of the sign. Only if the sign is posited as an isolated subject, as a self point from which it moves away. So falling into the world is something against our existential condition only if we think of subject in a Cartesian sense, as without a world. First of all, simply as thought. That's not the way in which he wants to break out of the Cartesian mode. The sign can fall prey only because it is concerned with understanding attuned being in the world. On the other hand, authentic existence is nothing which hovers over entangled everydayness, but is existentially only a modified grasp of everydayness. Another question. So I am trying to produce different quotations to show that existential authentic choice is a way in which we modify our given. So given can be normative, ethical rules. So those, how do we modify in our situation? in terms of, oh, this is exactly what I want to do, in terms of our ownedness of the choice. That makes it authentic is the idea. Nor does wanting to have a conscience, which we define as being towards death, mean a detachment in which one flees from the world. So there is no absolute detachment from the world, but brings one without illusions, without deceptions, to the resoluteness of acting in the situations, in a moment of vision. Augenblick is the term that he uses. Now, these passages which I have produced before you, for me, these are very significant passages. These give us the insight about authentic existence. We are simple, frail human beings. Authentic being is a process of continuous becoming without an absolute stop, as the scholar Michael Levy argues in a book of 2005 called Heidegger and the Place of Ethics. He's a British scholar, British Heideggerian. So, because Dasein has a past since its birth, a store of possibilities, out of which some are authentically or inauthentically made real or chosen at each moment. So, towards the end of Being and Time, certainly Heidegger comes back and discusses historicity to say that Dasein is not merely this projection towards the future and towards its death, but it has a moment of birth. And from there onwards, a story is spun around which its choices are based. So we have to look back. Dasein is like a line which is stretching towards the beginning and the end. So, so Heidegger asks, can Dasein be understood still more primordially than in the project of authentic existence? Yes, it can be understood more primordially than in the project of authentic existence, because authentic, absolute authentic existence as something that happens once and for all is not there. So that will be the more primordial, something more primordial than authentic existence, because we are historical beings. So the sign does not become fully authentic and remains unchanged forever from some point. Instead, authentic being and authentic choices are flashes of insights or moments of vision, Augenblick, within the temporal stream of the science awareness experiences. So, in whatever appears to be an authentic choice, which is also ethical, there must be some kind of way in which we can explain it to make it our own, to help us to see how it upholds our responsibility for our being, both in the case of our own being, oneself, and in the case of the other. Because our being, as I said, being in the world has three elements. One is our being towards ourselves, the other is our being towards others, and the being towards our things in the world. So, how all these responsibilities are taken care of, irrespective of whether the choice is following the accepted norm or not. So free choices shouldn't be conformed repetitions of the norm. Simply reproducing the norm shouldn't be a free choice. But it is an exhibition, a demonstration of our courage to flout some of the norms and the courage to repeat some of the norms as our own, as the case may be, as an act in line with one's own uniquely authentic being. Because finally, in our choices, we are choosing as individuals, as this particular self, authentic being, the specific me, myself, that I am in relation to this, my world. Therefore, to be ethical, I must be able to show how my act can be seen as good, at least for myself. In this way, there is a kind of inescapable, unavoidable being torn between authentic ethical motivations and inauthentic regulations which are coming from society. Though our moral decisions can be authentic as well as in line with regulations, but this is not necessarily so. Sometimes our authentic moral decisions have to flout society's moral norms. So there are bound to be occasions when our choices go against the rule. As we sometimes say that The best ethical individual is the one who knows when to flout the ethical norm. So Norman Suazo, uh, 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 a scholar, he does a Heidegger reading of Sophocles' Philoctetus, and in this article called Heidegger and the Situation of Ethics. So, like that, I now want to end by looking at one episode of the Mahabharata from this point of view of Heidegger that I was trying to expose before you. So, I turn to that now. I hope you're all there.
Yes, sir.
Arjuna's arrogant lick. So, the episode I'm going to concentrate on is the war, some of the war decisions of Arjuna. In this, we are looking at it just like the Westerners do with Greek epics and all that. There are several things that we are bracketing. These, the morality of the Mahabharata, very often are not the moralities of contemporary times. Several questions on gender, caste, class, and so on are not the questions raised in the epic. But we look at the epic in terms of its own logic and rules. So, in the Mahabharata, Adhyaya 8, Karna Parva, when Karna's chariot wheel, you know this episode, chariot wheel is stuck in the mud. Karna refers to the dharma of war. And he tells Arjuna that true kings and true heroes, they are not cowards. They do not attack somebody who is unarmed. They do not attack the one who is consumed by one's fate, because Karna is supposed to be affected by a tragic curse, two tragic curses. A true hero does not attack who comes in front of him with folded hands, because folded hands means here especially the arms, the bow and all are left in the chariot, and Karna has come down. He pleads for one who the hero does not attack the one who pleads for refuge, one who puts down his weapons, one who is without arrows, one whose armor has fallen. Armor has fallen. So when somebody of this sort helplessly stands unarmed in the earth, upon the earth, in front of the great hero warrior, Karna, according to Karna's reasoning, and he refers to Arjuna's compassion and dharma and all. And he says, in this kind of a situation, I cannot be killed, I cannot be slain. Now, Krishna is the charioteer. He has foreknowledge of the whole situation, and he had already instructed Arjuna what must be done. But when Krishna hears Karna speaks like this, he, in order to perhaps to charge up or fire up Arjuna and his valor in battle, because Krishna already has the experience of he giving up initially. So he is actually charging up Arjuna perhaps for the final kill, and he begins to ridicule Karna's pleas. And he says that base people, bad people, or evil people blame their fate for the impending end, which is the deserving end for their actions. Forgetting their misdeeds, they plead for mercy. And Krishna asks Karna where his dharma was when Draupadi was disrobed, when Shakuni's trickery actually defeated Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, and in the game of dice, and all their misfortunes happened after that. So where was his dharma then? Where was his dharma when the young defenseless boy Abhimanyu was encircled and slayed against all the rules and dharma of war by actually the guardians of dharma, including Dronacharya? So where was his dharma then, was the question. And in the main version of Mahabharata, Arjuna immediately does exactly he gets the insinuations from Krishna's speech, and he immediately acts, and he attacks Karna and slays him, a defenseless Karna, and he of course becomes the tragic hero of the Mahabharata. because especially Arjuna doesn't know that he is the eldest brother, actually the crown prince when the Pandavas win the war. Now, this is one of the most wide moments of the great Mahabharata epic. Whose side we as readers will take? Now, a reader has a sense of the ambiguities of life arising in our own, as readers in our own lives. Relentless ambiguities that always arise in our life. We have a sense of these Augenblick moments in our own lives. Therefore, we must presume that the reader is not a saint, not a god, not an angel, but a frail human actor. So, but still, with whom he will be completely in a dilemma. The reader, he or she will be completely in dilemma which side to choose. Now, there is a modern Malayalam retelling of the Mahabharata from the point of view of the second Pandava, Bhima, by one author you might know. He's quite well known. I think he's also award winner, several national awards winner. It's called M.T. Vasudevan Nair. He has written a book called a novel called Randamuram, meanings the second turn in 1984. And for this, he won great awards. It's considered his best. It's actually a different retelling of the Mahabharata in great long epic in about 400 pages, 350 pages. In this version, MT has it that Krishna's words, what Krishna says in the actual epic, were exactly the thoughts that ran in Arjuna's mind in the thick of the battle. Now, who can deny that this possibility cannot be? When we know that, when we know what happened before and what happens later in the epic, all the episodes we know, when that is there, how can we give up? How can we say no to this possibility? Because the tragic core of this whole episode is that Arjuna didn't yet to know that his adversary is also his brother. So in MT's version, his hero Bhima is musing about the circumstances of Karna's fall. Uh, but Bhima in MT's version already knows that Karna is his eldest brother and the eldest Pandava, the heir to the throne of Hastinapura when the battle is won. And he has great admiration for anybody who is good in battle, Bhima. We know that is again, you cannot say, MT cannot say this because he likes people who are good at warfare. He has great admiration for Karna in MT's version as the finest warrior, and he has a hidden contempt for Yudhishthira, his elder brother, a moralistic preacher kind of a king, who goes limp in the midst of war. Now, in the episode I am referring to, Arjuna is retelling very proudly after the events of the 17th day of battle, after killing Karna. He is retelling the events to Bhima in the evening of the 17th day. And Arjuna is saying, Karna asked for relief to change his chariot wheel in the name of the dharma of war. And Arjuna is recounting his reply to Bhima, not in the actual version, but in MT's version. And exactly the words of MT put into the mouth of Arjuna are, Dharma Yuddha was over with the fall of Bhishmacharya. I asked Karna, what dharma of war was enacted in Kurukshetra when Abhimanyu, or against Abhimanyu, when my son Abhimanyu was killed. So in MT's version, Arjuna did not even ask Karna about Draupadi Vastraharan. But he asks only about the unkindest moment of the whole battle, slaying of his defenseless son, young Abhimanyu. Now, MT's hero is actually not Arjuna. is Bhima, and Bhima recollects the scene of Abhimanyu's death. He had a genuine, Bhim had a genuine affection for his nephew also, because he is again good at battle, the finest of young Pandava warriors, and he was a fine young lad. He always admired those who fought fearlessly without escaping the war, escapist, moralizing talk like his elder brother Yudhishthira. He wouldn't disobey Yudhishthira, but always undertook a kind of rebellious inner journey against these needless moralizations and excuses. Bhim, according to MT's version. So Bhim is thinking, when Arjuna says about this, Bhim is thinking about Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu is trapped within the Padmavyuha formation. And Abhimanyu, when that happens, Abhimanyu fought alone against 6 exceptional warriors: Jayadratha, Drona, Kripa, Ashwathama, Dronacharya's son, Karna, and Shalya. And it was Karna who broke Abhimanyu's bow from behind, again against the law of battle, and as advised by the great Dronacharya, who is the epitome of the morals of war. When Abhimanyu lost his horse and the chariot, he stood on the ground and fought. Losing his bow and the arrow, he was fighting with the mace, the sword, and the chariot wheel. When he lost consciousness and fell on the ground, actually it was Dusahasana's son, actually the second Kaurava's son, Lakshman, who killed him with a deadly blow on his head. According to NT's version, I think it's also the real version. And Bhima is filled with remorseful anger against Yudhishthira. Why? Because Bhima repents now for leaving Jayadratha free at one episode before, when they were in the forest. He's livid with remorse and anger and blames Yudhishthira for letting Jayadratha go, because Jayadratha is the one who trapped Abhimanyu in the Padmavyuha. And he was actually caught when they were in the forest for the serious offense of abducting Draupadi. And according to the gender rules of the time, Bhima believes that he deserved to die. So Yudhishthira is the dharma abiding ethical figure in the epic, and he makes actually for a sour ethical ideal. In fact, if we think from the existential ethical point of view, he is the follower of the rule book to the dot. The more revealing ethical figure in the episode is Arjuna, the one who does his ethical, of course, Bhima in MT's version, but I want to concentrate on Arjuna, the one who does its ethical reasoning in the thick of battle and manifests his own authentic self in the ensuing decision about, killing Karna. And he does so not by thinking too much about the rule. And as it were, he has opened his own rule book there and then at the spur of the moment, on the spur of the moment. As the context of action unfolds, can we blame him is the question. If Arjuna is going to shoot the arrow and kill a defenseless Karna, whose chariot is stuck in the mud, he has already reasoned, MT tells us quickly, that his opponents in battle did not follow any code when his defenseless young son Abhimanyu was under attack by several seasoned warriors, all of them together attacking their young teenage boy. Now, Arjuna also shows this kind of ability to throw away the rule book at some other episodes of the epic. The opening scenes of the war is one example. Arjuna is shocked at the sight of the war. It is actually the war of brothers, cousins, and the larger group of brothers. And he quickly opens his own rule book of dharma, and he begins to argue with his charioteer and friend and guide, Krishna. And he pleads to turn back from the rule book dharma of killing one's own kith and kin for the sake of Raja Dharma or honor of the king. But he is persuaded by Krishna, who has a magic with words, MT says. and the magic of the abstract ethics of action, as NT puts it. And this ethics of action, we are referring to Nishkama Karma, without actors, without self-interest, without any interest. It is more impersonal an ethics than Kantian formalism of categorical imperative. I'll take a few more minutes. There's another interesting, more interesting point in the war when Arjuna is seen in completely human form. On the 16th day, according to MT's version, and maybe it's right in the main version also, Yudhishthira returns to the Pandava tent with wounds all over his body. And Karna was ruling the battlefield completely. He was dominating. Now, when Arjuna returns and seeing him, Yudhishthira is completely put off. And initially he thought that he's coming after defeating Karna. When he realizes that he is not, he simply attacks him. Yudhishthira attacks him. So we see another phase of Yudhishthira here. He says, you came away leaving Bhima alone. Better say that you retreated in fear of Karna. Wounded all over my body by Karna's arrows, I was the object of ridicule for the whole of Kaurava army. If you're scared of Karna, give your Gandivam, the bow, to Krishna. He will do it. In the remaining part of the war, you be the charioteer. I am a fool to have believed your bragging for 13 long years, is what Yudhishthira says, according to NT's version. Now Arjuna becomes very furious and he throws away the bow and he takes his sword. And he says, in front of Krishna and several others, with your beheading, that is, if I cut off your head, this war will be actually over for good. The perpetual coward, that's what you are, who always stands half a mile away from the scene of battle. You know only one thing, the low-born occupation of the game of dice. How do you deserve to be a king? The coward who does not even deserve to share Draupadi's bed. If I am called a coward by my brother Bhima, remember that MT's hero is Bhima in this version, who can face 1,000 foes single-handedly, that will be forgiven. But in the whole MT's version, there is a close bond between Arjuna and Bhima. What right have you? Today, I must put an end to this curse of the Pandava brothers. That is, I must put an end to your life. Krishna immediately jumps in and pacifies both the brothers. And he struggles to calm down his friend Arjuna, his friend and his sister's husband, Abhimanyu's father. And of course, Yudhishthira asks pardon, and Arjuna responds, and that episode then ends there. Here, we see an Arjuna who does not back away from fearless interpretations of the moral situation. And in the actual context of the Karna Parva we were referring to, Arjuna has made a decision, invested existentially with affects, because it was his son who was unjustly treated. Reasons, he has his reasons. And because Dronacharya and all other great warriors did not follow the moral rule then. And phronesis is an idea in Aristotle which speaks about practical reasoning as opposed to theoretical reasoning, or in Kant's term, pure reason and practical reason, as it were. So phronesis has certain structure according to Aristotle. And all this shows that he is also investing his own personality into this decision making. What is his personality? The unconquerable warrior. He doesn't want to lose. The loving father. And this particular boy was born of his most favorite wife, Subhadra. And the one invested in opening his own rule book of Dharma. All this shines through in Arjuna's decision, as we see it. I put this picture here as in order just to show this picture I've taken from that particular website, which was playing before the talk began. So this is something like a picturization in my mind of the person, the existential angst with which the person, the existentially serious person who is making his decision. There are some moments in our life when we have to make these decisions. Maybe in the case of a marriage against social norms, family norms, maybe in the case of choosing an area of study as opposed to parents' strictures and so on. There are boys in IIT. Sometimes they are very high profile students, they have passed great tests, but sometimes they give up and take up a philosophy or art or filmmaking and something like that, to the great pain and suffering of their parents. How do we make these decisions and these choices? That's what we have been talking about. To conclude, rather than following the rule book, phronesis, the Aristotelian idea of phronesis, is perhaps important for the kind of existential ethics that we have been speaking about. There are, of course, normative ideals, normative guidelines, social norms. These are important. They are not simply given there. They come about very often, especially today after debates. So there are very good reasons why they are there. Sometimes not so good reasons also, and these reasons and contexts change. So they have to be interpreted and made fitting for our moments of decision. Sometimes, at least sometimes, they become so thoroughly unfitting for our moment of decision. They are of no use. The ethics of authenticity is useful when we think about those moments. Ethics of authenticity is telling us about contextual interpretations of norms, as well as our ability to set aside these norms, sometimes completely, when we make our decisions, when we have good reasons to do so, when we should not and are not able to consult others in making those decisions. So the ethics of authenticity perhaps is important when we consider our contemporary desires about good life. So in these desires, my own life must be visibly present, unabashedly. And that should be there in my project of seeking the good. If that is not there, whose good life am I going to lead? Somebody else's, my parents, my society's. My life is in good life when I do not put myself into it. I follow the norms set by others. My social setup should be arranged in such a way as to help me, to let me make my own self in my search for my good life real, provided my search is not destructively at crossroads. It doesn't get into the shoes of the others and their searches of their paths for their own good life. So our conception of good life, according to the ethics of authenticity that I was trying to show, will reveal, as I see it, that there are infinite number of ways to be happy, rather than some very narrow ones there, which we are constantly seduced into saying that these are the only ones. And we think that our modern contemporary culture is giving us actually a tradition was pre-modern life was completely choiceless. And today we are given plenty of choices and freedom is real. But we are increasingly realizing that this is not the case. Contemporary culture is imposing on us, through its techno-capitalistic pursuit of commodities, certain particular ways in which happiness is framed. If we think of the infinite number of ways in which we can be happy, given our particularly finite number of possibilities, one must find one's authentic way to be happy within, in terms of these, rather than in terms of these very structured techno-capitalistic pursuits of being happy. So we were speaking about Arjuna and his decision, his Augenblick moment. At the same time, Arjuna's decision in the thick of battle is not something completely external to his ethical, historical, his contemporary world. It is an instance of flouting the ethical norm in the thick of the situation, whereby one is able to produce an ethical reasoning that is authentic to oneself and to some extent authentic to also one's world. Because no ethical rulebook can envisage all the situations in which it is put into practice and all the decision processes into which it will have to be profiled. That it cannot do. That has to be done by each individual actor. Therefore, according to me, I was trying to persuade you to think it that way, that there is a Heideggerian ethics of authenticity in that case of Arjuna. With that, I close. Thank you so much. Here is a quotation from Simone de Beauvoir. Human beings must not attempt to dispel the ambiguity of their being, but on the contrary, accept the task of realizing it. To declare that existence is ambiguous is to assert that its meaning is never fixed, that it must be constantly one. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Was
well, wonderful. It was really very refreshing to listen to Professor George's presentation of Heidegger's view of ethics, with a ending with a Heideggerian reading of one of the attempts to reconstruct some parts of Mahabharata. Wonderful. So I'm sure that many of our participants might have many questions or clarifications to ask Professor George. So please go ahead.
are they all philosophy?
Yes, yes, yes. Some of them are doing PhD, some of them are planning to enter into PhD program.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
Mm.
So it's
Uh,
very
sir,
lucid. Yes,
uh,
please
s-
go ahead.
sir, I have a question. Sir, in Martin Heidegger's original project, so in that project, Dasein's returning back to its own self, the true self, does that imply that it's the end of ethics or the transcending the norm, transcending the conventional ethics? Is it a complete end to the conventional ethics or just transcending the norms of conventional ethics?
Uh, yeah. So is it a end
Is it
of is it an end of
complete
ethics?
end of conventional ethics or just transcending the norms of conventional ethics?
What is the difference?
I mean, the ethics we are having in our hand. I mean, just we want to put in. Just we want to. Well, just we. The ethic. Just to describe. But how shall I put it?
Shall I put it like this? See, um,
I'm disobeying.
there's a spirit of ethics and there are norms of ethics.
Yes. I'm just
Yeah,
disobeying the norms of ethics, the conventional
yeah.
norms
So
of ethics.
norms may not always hold the spirit of ethics. Norms are also, numbered and all that. But there is a spirit of ethics which Heidegger might still hold, but the norms might look inauthentic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but I mean, through our cultural upbringing, I mean, how can we understand the distinction between the conventional normative ethics and the true spirit of ethics?
Hmm. Huh.
No,
Actually, Heidegger is saying that this is what this is the way in which I would like to distinguish between a kind of a Sartrean existential ethics and a Heideggerian one. Usually, we think that Sartre is thinking of uh, a, a free subject who is able to go beyond the free. Of course, he doesn't say it, but there is a kind of over investment in the free subject, perhaps in Sartrean existentialist ethics, if you want to call it that way. But here, I was trying to argue that this is why I was trying to emphasize all the time that we are not in a when we make an authentic existential choice, ethical choice, we are not outside our world. Our circle of friends or circle of others in our situation are not different. Our possibilities are not absolutely extraneous. All this I was trying to emphasize. but only our way of looking at these possibilities, these finite number of ways in which we can profile our world. These actually not finite. Although the ways the world is finite, the ways in which we can profile it are infinite. So, but at the same time, it has a relation to the world as such, our world. So this emphasis in Heidegger is important as I see it.
Okay.
So to that extent, we cannot completely come out of the social norms of ethics or social debates of ethics, etc. But we can have our own very personalized investment on this. And some of those investments may be flouting some of the narrow interpretations or within. See, when we flout something social, something moral, actually we are using it, we are doing it using our vocabulary, which is socially given. We are using it in relation to certain possibilities of our social world, which are already there, and perhaps its negation, etc. So these are all actually in relation to the world. We are not suddenly thinking of possibilities which are completely extraneous to our world. That's not possible. We don't have the vocabulary for doing it, the framework or the apparatus for doing it. This is the Heideggerian insight. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And sir, another thing is, you also mentioned it at one place of your lecture that the returning bank of design to its truest self. So, is it? Can we have a conversation between Nietzschean ethics and Heidegger's sense of ethics in this project? I mean, Nietzschean concept of Übermensch. So, after that returning back to that its original self, can we say that the self is becoming Nietzschean Übermensch?
I think no. If we think of course, there are many different interpretations of the Übermensch, but if we think of some of the interpretations, I at least are will will to power. Heidegger certainly wanted to move away from the philosophy of the will, because he not perhaps at the time in being in time, it is still a little bit decisionistic, as we call it, which is a philosophy of the will to some extent. But especially later, after being in time, Heidegger certainly wanted to move away from the philosophy of the will. He thought that his own Nazi fiasco, at one
Yes,
point
yes,
in
yes,
1933,
yes.
he himself did that. So all that he thought are errors that crop up when we overemphasize the will and the science decision. But my talk today is, centered around uh, being in time.
Being a time.
But even here, he at one level at least, we should see that there is an element of undercutting the Nietzschean will. Where is that? Uh, First of all, the call of conscience comes from the sign's own being,
Yes,
but the sign's own being is nothing outside its being in the world, in
yes,
relation to itself, in relation to others, in relation to the things of the world,
yes,
care for them. So it is not an absolutely Nietzschean type of, maybe there are interpretations of even Nietzsche which are not so, self-will driven kind of a thing. But usually we think it that way, and will to power is interpreted that way. And if that were the case, then Heidegger is a kind of antidote to that. But
okay,
of course, there are difficulties because Heidegger's politics later is very problematic, and maybe later Heidegger is entering into a kind of pacifistic, or very anti-will kind of a mood. But he has reasons for doing that, because he thinks that the technological world is all about the will, and this kind of a formulation is going to be completely planetary domination, and this is going to be totally destructive. It is completely going to wipe out human beings, so shepherding and caring of being, all that put together. But I think it's at least an important version of existentialist
Yes.
choice-based ethics.
And sir, and the three categories in being in the world, being with others, being with things, and being with the self. So, what is the difference between being with others and being with the things? It is only that the difference of life, that being with others is alive and being with things, they are not alive. And
Hmm.
has he talking about something like object oriented ontology?
No, we can draw an object on oriented ontology from Heidegger, especially the later Heidegger. But of course, even from Being and Time. But there is a distinction that he makes in Being and Time between being towards others. This is a very important question. Being towards others and being towards things. Um, Others are other daseins,
Okay.
and they are beings who have an understanding of being.
Okay.
They have an element of answerability towards being.
Okay.
And his animal ethics to a great extent is still, this is why Derrida and all criticizing, still they are in terms of certain gradation. For example, in 1929, in one lecture, Heidegger speaks about animals. Human beings are beings in the world. They have a world, which means they have a frame of meaning. Animals have a world, but they are poor in the world.
Okay.
Things have no world at all. They're worldless. So these categorizations are there. That's why object oriented ontology of, who is that? Um, Actor network theorists like some of the French theorists, he will not really fall into that category. Though his later building, dwelling, thinking, and the thing, the essay called The Thing, those are interpreted more like object-oriented ontology.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Professor George, I just wanted to, ask you one thing about this idea of authenticity. Is it a kind of substantive moral, goal to achieve, or is it a fractured, what should I say, uh, uh, idea always in making? I mean, how could one interpret Heidegger in this context?
Hmm. Um, of course, Heidegger is very clear. At least he wants to be very clear that it's not a moral ideal that he's speaking about at all. He says it's an ontological thing. It's simply about whether I own myself or not own myself.
Mhm.
But of course, we can find ethical resonances throughout whenever he speaks about the falling the sign or inauthentic the sign. For example, he makes very uh, critical statements about the media.
Mm.
Everybody reads a newspaper like everybody else, which means the interpretive frame is set and you are not able to see another way of seeing things when you read the
Mm.
newspaper or anything else for that matter.
Mm.
So his constant complaint right from Being in Time until the very end is that there's a leveled form of techno-modern understanding which is creeping in, seeping in. And if we don't resist this, we are making technological objects, but we are also becoming technological objects.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that very mechanical way of
Mm.
understanding a human being is a problem for
Mm. Mm.
him. But uh, and therefore, I think, and this interpreter I was quoting today, Michael Levy, he interprets. I must also tell you now that students are there. I must also tell you that uh, there are many other ways in which this is interpreted. There are
Mm.
people who argue that in a very liberal, individualistic
Mm.
sense, There are people who argue, especially the American interpreters, they argue that what is the ideal of being a time is the authentic individual who chooses. Yeah, but this interpreter I was quoting today, Michael Levy, he's saying that we cannot reach a plateau of authenticity and remain there as it were we have achieved. That's not the ideal in being in time at all. He's trying to understand a view of the human being which is very anti-Cartesian, which is going above all that enlightenment, modernity, and that projection of the human being as a master of his choices, master of himself. But he's trying to see a very fragile, caught between many things. Moods and thought will go together. So between all this, how do we make how so do we want to be authentic? Yes, that is there, but it's a very difficult project, and he doesn't want to run away from that difficulty at all. So that's the way I would like to see it. That's why I was producing those passages which to some extent support my interpretation. But there are of course other ways to as well. But I think this is a very good way, because it will be consistent with the later Heidegger as well, as I see it.
No, I find your reading of Heidegger into this particular incident of Mahabharata is very, very interesting. I think one could develop this further.
If there is possibility, I want to
Yes,
try
yes,
more of it. This is now
yes,
MT's version I concentrated, but we could also
right.
go to the original
Original,
Mahabharata.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
But his MT's version is very interesting, because his hero is Bhim,
Beam,
and finally Bhima, according to him, MT's version, Kunti's children are not of the gods. So MT's Mahabharata is a very again human Mahabharata. The gods and the divine phenomena are erased to a great extent. So Kunti's children are, Yudhishthira is actually Vidura's child towards the end of, and there are some nuances of that in the original Mahabharata apparently. And Bhima is the son of a forester, somebody a strong man who comes. So he's almost a tribal,
yes,
an
yes, yes.
Adivasi or something like that. So his emotions are very direct.
Yes,
His valor in battle is unparalleled.
yes,
He killed all the Kauravas, and yet he has to give up the throne. So he's the tragic hero of MT.
yes, yes.
Anyway,
Wonderful.
yeah.
So, yeah, any other question or clarification? Well, I guess then let us, end this session with conveying again very, very sincere thanks on our part to Professor George for this very, very nice, interesting, thought-provoking, presentation of Heidegger. So, thank you very much, Professor George.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and we'll meet again. So, how
Sure,
did the
sure.
course go?
Oh, it went very well. Actually, we had wonderful lectures by different experts on different areas of Western philosophy. So yeah, it went very well. Actually, this morning we had a lecture by Dr. Nishat Patnaik on Husserl and Kant.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah. So very good. Yeah, it went very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Professor George.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.